All right, we will get started with our afternoon session. So thank you guys for coming back. I just wanted to make a note. These talks are being recorded and they can be accessed on St. Patrick's Parish website. And they'll also be on the diocesan YouTube, Chris's YouTube channel, the Office of Ministry and Evangelization. So the talks are being recorded for that. I totally butchered the title, but they're out there somewhere. So this afternoon we'll have Melissa and Lydia from the Catholic Charities Adoption Agency come and share with us. So as Chris mentioned, they work in the Diocese of La Crosse, but they also serve the Diocese of Superior as well. And they do a lot of amazing work for families in the areas of pregnancy and adoption. So they will share what they do with us. So please help me welcome up Melissa and Lydia.
All right. So I am Melissa Bomey. I'm the Director of Family Services with Catholic Charities, and I've been there for 19 years, which has been a journey in and of itself. But before we get going, I just want to thank Chris. I actually was a social worker on call when Dee called about the baby. And so I was the one that got to go to the hospital, work with them, and then was there to witness the wonderful connection that they had. So I had many tears this morning, so that was awesome.
My name is Lydia Deering, and I am one of our adoption and pregnancy support social workers out of the Eau Claire office.
We are just going to do a real quick snapshot of what adoption and pregnancy support looks like through our agency. So the mission of Catholic Charities Diocese of La Crosse proclaims Christ's gospel of life and promotes human dignity by alleviating poverty and strengthening individuals and families. We truly believe that the Family Services Program encompasses that through adoption and pregnancy support. Our diocese, like everybody has said, covers the Diocese of Superior for adoption and pregnancy support services. We also cover Madison Diocese as well. We have offices in Eau Claire, Wausau, La Crosse, and Milwaukee. And we actually partner with the Diocese of Green Bay in Madison for another program that we have that Lydia is going to talk about later called the Wisconsin Adoption and Permanency Support Program.
We wear a lot of hats around here.
We do. So the adoption program is based on the principle that every child has a need for and a right to love, guidance, and the security of a stable home. The goal of adoption is finding the most suitable and permanent home for every child. We base our program that the child is the core. We are here to be the voice for the child. We love our adoptive families. We love working with birth parents, but we're here because of the child.
So Chris already stole half of what we were going to say this morning, but that's okay. You guys aren't going to be able to read it over there because it's really tiny print, but these are some truth and myths of adoption, and I'm going to read them for you. Myth: if you love your child, you would not consider adoption. The truth is that making an adoption plan for a child is a loving decision where the child's needs are considered the most important. Another myth is that you'll never know anything about your child or the adoptive parents in the future. And as you heard this morning, that is completely a myth. There is truth in that adoption is open, often. Birth parents and adoptive families are involved in choosing that level of openness, which is considered for all parties. Myth: birth parents forget about their child after that adoption occurs. I wish I could put like a big red flag. Wrong. Birth parents never forget their child. They remember that pregnancy, the birth, the decision. Birth parents love their children, and they only want what's best for their future. Myth: it takes years to get placement. A little bit, yeah, sometimes, but oftentimes it depends on the type of adoption we're talking about. In an international adoption, which you'll hear about in a little while, there is a fairly consistent timeline. However, in a domestic adoption, it really depends on how active those adoptive parents are in the process. Myth: adoption costs are prohibitive. Truth is that adoption is expensive. However, several families find creative ways to fundraise, receive grants, or et cetera, to help offset that cost. And we're going to hear more about that later. Myth, adoption always ends in tears. The truth is that there is loss and grief for all of the members of the family in that triad, the adoptee, the birth parents, and the adoptive parents. However, that loss and grief is coupled with joy and hope. So one of the things that we do is our pregnancy support services. This program is designed to support and comfort pregnant women, their partners, and their family during a very stressful time, and perhaps maybe even the most stressful time of their life. We have someone who is on call 24/7, so if Melissa leaves, that's why. 365 days, it is her lucky week, guys.
Yeah, I'm on call.
She's on call right now. So we have a social worker that is working with those individuals from the moment that they call our office. And this is throughout that entire region that we have talked about already throughout that space. So who are those women that we're serving? The idea of a college or a high school aged woman is not necessarily the reality anymore.
I just did the statistics. Our median age of a birth mom is 26 years old now. Almost half of them have children in the home that they're already parenting. And the vast majority of them come to us with either an alcohol, drug dependency issue or an active mental health crisis. That in and of itself are some challenges that they're facing, and now they face an unplanned pregnancy. It kind of throws them into a pretty bad crisis, and that's when they reach out to us. And we're here to support them. We're non-judgmental. We are here to guide them, to support them. They're feeling isolated, alone, some scared. A lot of times they're single, they don't know where to turn, and that's what we're here to do.
So we offer them with free support from the very point of contact that they make with us, whether that's a phone call or a website inquiry or a knock on the front door of an office. We support them regardless of their situation. And so again, you're not going to be able to see all the words on here, and I'm not going to read all of them for you, but I'm just going to kind of give you an idea of after an expectant parent reaches out to us at Catholic Charities, a worker connects with them within 24 hours, ideally within like 2 hours, but there is such a thing as the middle of the night, and sometimes it takes a minute to get a hold of them. The worker will discuss life options, either parenting or adoption, and support that person to make the best decision for her and for her child. If they choose to parent, we provide resources and education as they start that journey we're alongside them the whole time there. If they choose adoption and create an adoption plan, they select a family. They can meet the family, discuss what life might look like with that family for her child. This also includes a birth or a hospital plan. And then the birth mother can determine who will care for the child after birth. We walk through every one of those minute details with them. After that child is born, at discharge, the birth parent decides if the baby will go to a transition home or if the adoptive parents will take that child home. The birth parents have until, and Chris already alluded to this, that termination of parental rights hearing to change their mind if they want to choose to parent. In Wisconsin, the birth mother must go to that court hearing, which is an incredibly stressful and emotional time for them. It's a very, very emotional time, and we as the worker come alongside them and attend that court hearing hand in hand with them. In the state of Wisconsin, the rights of the birth parents are terminated and guardianship is granted to us as an agency for approximately 6 months until that adoption can be finalized. We continue to support that birth parent for as long as needed, really. Whether that looks like texts every day or a phone call every 3.5 months, or once a year they reach out and say, hey, I'm having a really rough day and I just want to talk to somebody who gets it. We continue to support them because there's really nowhere else for them to turn.
No, like I said, I've been with the agency for 19 years, and I've worked 19 years with a birth mother. Twice a year she contacts me just to check in and to kind of give me an update on her life. When she came to us, she was not in a good place. She was not in a good place at all. She was facing prison, and I was always there for her, and whenever she needed me, I was there. And so now that her life has turned around, she wants to share the joy. So It is an honor to walk with these women during their difficult time, but also to know how they do afterwards as well.
And Chris, again, already said this part as well.
You stole a lot of our
you really
stuff.
stole it, man. You cannot have an adoption without a birth parent.
Right.
You cannot have an adoption without a birth parent. It's impossible. That birth parent is an integral part. Though we focus on the child, that birth parent is an integral part to that entire story. And so the idea of just pushing them to the side is just not okay with us as an agency. We're client-led services. We are going off of what that birth parent might need. Again, Melissa's already alluded to this. They're walking in with a lot of emotional turmoil, whether that's from just this crisis or the fact that they have a diagnosis or they don't have anywhere to live or whatever that might look like for them. So we talked a little bit about our pregnancy support and birth parents, and so now we're going to talk a little. Oh, you want more?
I'm going to jump in. Since Roe versus Wade has been overturned, that has impacted our services. We did a large marketing campaign to let women know that we are here. We have seen a significant increase of women reaching out for the things that we talked about, for support, for guidance, for resources. Right now, currently, we have 25 open birth moms. Typically, we have about 10 at any given time. So I'm asked quite frequently, how has that impacted your services? It has impacted our services. But they're also, like I said, coming to us in very difficult situations. And that takes a lot of time. Like Lydia said, sometimes it's daily contact with them to make sure that they're doing okay. And they don't disappear. We have a couple of birth moms right now who are homeless. One day they're in a park. One day they're in a garage. We try to get them housing. We try to get them resources, but ultimately it's client driven. And if they don't want to go, we can't make them go. So, go ahead.
Oh, that was beautiful. So we're going to talk a little bit about adoption as well, because that is part of the reason that we are here.
So adoption is not an easy process. Adoption is very complicated. Chris alluded to all the paperwork.
Hey, I would wish every one of my families had the joy that Chris was talking about with their paperwork. Yeah. All right? Do you hear that if you're listening online?
Yeah, there is a lot of paperwork. And for the first 3 months of the process, it is a lot of a social worker invading your life. We have to, because we have to write a 25, 26-page summary of who you are. And so there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of interviewing. The state of Wisconsin mandates education. But ultimately, we are here to walk that journey with you. And we pride ourselves in being there for you when you have questions and to help you get through that process. When you come to us, we want you to really think about whether or not adoption is for you, because it is so hard. So we throw questions out at you to make sure that you know that this is something you want to do, such as, why do I want to adopt a child? What type of adoption am I interested in pursuing? Do I have the emotional and physical resources available to adopt a child? Are we committed as a family to this adoption? It's just not mom and dad adopting. If there are bio kids, they have to be on board too. Do I have the ability to love unconditionally? Am I willing to find the necessary resources for my child should they need to rise? Like I said, a lot of our birth moms come from difficult places. A lot of times our kids come from difficult places. So an adoptive family has to know the resources in their community and be willing to reach out for them.
So practically, what does that look like as an agency or as a family thinking about it?
Go ahead.
Okay. First, you have to select an agency. We're not the only adoption agency around, and we want you to be comfortable. We want the families that come to work with us to feel comfortable with us. I don't know how many times I've told a family during an information meeting, hey, I want you to go ahead and call another adoption agency and talk to them. And I want you to make sure that you feel comfortable with me. I want you to make sure that you have all the information that you feel is necessary. Because really we are, as Melissa said, we're invading your privacy in a lot of ways when we work with families. So you want to find an agency that you feel comfortable with, and you want to make sure that agency is licensed. So we are a licensed child placing agency. We're accredited through the Council on Accreditation and Hague accredited, which is a bunch of fancy terms to say that we do a lot of work every 3 to 4 years to make sure that we keep our license.
Yep. Go ahead, talk about the home study process.
Then there's also that home study process, which we've already alluded to a few times. This is about a 3 to 4 month intensive process. We are educating and preparing that family for adoption. We're gathering information on them to compile into that report. We're getting background checks done. We're talking to them about their marriage, their education, their job history, their religion, their hobbies, etc. And then we're helping that family evaluate their decision to make sure that they are really invested in this, because ultimately, we want that child to go to a home that is truly invested in them for the rest of their lives.
So there's a variety of type of adoptions, and that being international, independent, in-state, interstate, step-parent, relative, and public adoptions. So we're just going to do a quick overview of all those types of adoption. So international adoption is just that. You adopt a child internationally from another country. COVID really threw a monkey wrench into that. There are some countries that still are not open. The other popular country is Ukraine, and with the Ukrainian war going on, we actually, last week, had a family come home with 4 children from Ukraine. For about 3 months, they didn't even know if their children were alive. So we were very, very happy when they sent us the email saying, we got them, we're coming home. So it's a very complicated process. It is governed by the Hague Convention. The Hague Convention basically is a bunch of countries. There's 120 some, I think, that have signed on to it to ensure that the children being adopted internationally, it's being done ethically. Those children are actual orphans who need a home, and they're not being trafficked. So along with that comes a lot of red tape, a lot of hands and eyes watching the process. But I can tell you that I think last year we had 16 finalizations, and that's a slow year because of COVID. But those kids are doing great. They all come with their own unique needs, but the parents that are adopting internationally know those needs, and it's a great process to have those kids come home and thrive. So Baby Grace is one of those kids. Baby Grace on the right-hand side is her picture that her parents received from the orphanage. She was in pretty rough shape. She didn't, the parents honestly didn't know if she was going to be alive when they got there to get her. She was extremely malnourished. Actually, in that picture, she is 3 years old, I believe. And when she came home, she had to go through a lot of medical testing, a lot of medical treatments. But that is Baby Grace on the left-hand side with her adoption papers. She finalized here in the United States. So she is thriving, she's doing awesome, she's doing well in school. We love getting those pictures, Chris. We love hearing the good stories that happen with our kiddos. So that's just one of the stories of one of our kiddos that were adopted internationally.
Here's the deal. Melissa and I actually enjoy probably more so than presenting to you in this format, sitting around a table with a cup of coffee or a Diet Coke having a conversation. So we would love to be doing that right now. So if you have questions or comments, we'll take them as we go.
Yep.
But one of the things is we could sit here all day and tell you wonderful stories because we just love to do that. And the hard ones too. But So when we're talking about the opposite of international is domestic, and that means within the United States. And we have a couple of different programs, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on them, but just a brief overview. Interstate adoption is anywhere within the United States, within those 50 states. So these are families who want to adopt within the United States. We work with them to finish that home study, assist them in finding typically a secondary agency that's in a different state, provide education to them, and provide then post-placement services when that child comes home to Wisconsin. And this is typically, we use that secondary agency as a facilitation of the placement for them here in Wisconsin. So many of our families utilize that option. But we also have in-state adoption, and this is where the expectant parents choose adoptive parents for their child in the state of Wisconsin. And these are those expectant parents that we are working with in our agency typically. And we have some specific guidelines or eligibility requirements within our agency for those families, and they're kind of listed on the screen there. But ultimately, adopting couples must be married for a minimum of 2 years, have 1 child or less. Some exceptions are made for blended families. Documented infertility, be willing to participate in that open adoption, and be practicing in their faith. And then an attorney is used to help terminate the rights of those parental rights. We also have what's called independent adoption. And this is where the expectant parent and the adoptive family are matched without the use of any agency. So basically, they come to us and they say, hey, I want this person to adopt my child. And we're like, great, let's do it. And then we work with them to make that happen. That family still goes through all of the steps that any other family would, completing that education and that home study. The agency is necessary to complete the home study in the state of Wisconsin. That is law. And an attorney is still utilized for the termination of the parental rights.
So domestic adoption has completely changed in the 19 years that I've been here. 19 years ago, a birth mom would come into our agency. We would pull out all these profile books, like Dee referred to this morning, and the birth mom would go through that. Today, the majority of our birth moms are finding families online. They're coming to us saying, saw that family on your website and that's who I want to meet. So it's very important that our families nowadays who are interested in domestic are willing to market themselves, for lack of a better term. Because birth moms are finding them through social media, through the internet, through word of mouth, it's very important that they're willing to kind of expand and put themselves out there in that realm. We have had probably 6 to 8 finalizations this year already of birth moms and adoptive families who have found themselves through Facebook. Adoptive parents put up a Facebook page, kind of like Chris talked about, and a birth mom sees them, she reaches out to them, and that's how they get connected.
And for some of our families, this does feel like an invasion of privacy in some ways, so we want to make sure they feel comfortable with the information that they're sharing. But we do encourage them to make a website or a Facebook page or something that will let people know that they're doing it, because otherwise birth parents won't find them.
This is the Schutte family. The Schutte family we've worked with for all 4 of their adoptions. And she is the queen of marketing and getting connected with birth moms using social media platform. And so this was just a note she had sent to me. Dear Melissa, thank you so much for the postcard and the continued support. We are so thankful for you and all at Catholic Charities who make such an impact on our families such as ours. Here's a picture of our little monkeys. Your work each and every day is so appreciated. And that's David and Maria, Isaac, Eli, Jonah, and Sophia. And Sophia just finalized not too long ago.
That picture doesn't do them justice.
No.
They're adorable.
Yeah. So there are a few other types of adoption. Relative adoption, of course, is just that, a relative adopting the grandchild or adopting the child. Typically, that is grandparents adopting their grandchild. That is our largest growing adoption arena. Like I alluded to, birth moms have pretty significant issues, and a lot of times grandparents end up having the children placed in their home, and they want to make it permanent for them. So they come to us to finalize that adoption. Step-parent is step-parent who adopts their stepchild. And then public adoptions that are handled through the state of Wisconsin. So those are kids in the foster care system who are in the process of being adopted. That is a very long process. Typically, it takes 2 to 4 years. We do not do those. The state of Wisconsin contracts with Lutheran Social Services to do that service. Go ahead.
So typically that home study, we get this question a lot. So typically that home study process with our agency takes roughly 3 months from that application process, except for step parents. That's the only one that typically is a different timeline. But each type of adoption has a varied timeline after that. For international, sometimes the primary provider, so this is the agency, international families are going to work with an agency that has boots on the ground in the country that they're seeking to adopt from. And that they can normally give a more appropriate timeline for that specific country. And then for domestic, it really, we've already said, kind of depends on the contact that that adoptive family is having with any birth parents that might be interested.
So the financial aspects of adoption, it is expensive. There's no getting around it. But there's a lot of creative ways that people have found to offset some of the cost. Chris talked about what he's done. I had one family who created a t-shirt and sold it, and they ended up financing their entire adoption. So there are creative ways to offset some of those costs. We get a lot of families who apply for grants specific to offsetting those costs. And we've gotten, a lot of our families have gotten those kind of grants as well. There is a federal tax credit. Some employers have adoption as a benefit. So just like your health insurance and paid time off, they have an adoption benefit as well. Yeah.
So I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I also work for the program that we manage, which is called the Wisconsin Adoption and Permanency Support Program. So this is a statewide program. We have 6 offices for this particular program that, in addition to the 4 we already stated, also we have an office in Madison and Green Bay. And this is a program that offers supportive services for pretty much anyone impacted by adoption and guardianship. So we are running support groups virtually. We do family fun events. We do workshops and webinars. And these are available for those adoptive families, guardianship families, adult adoptees, birth families, anyone who might be interested in those. It's really built on collaboration between individuals, professionals, organizations, and community members throughout Wisconsin. And this is an excellent opportunity. I love to attend. I had an event early October, it's been a wild month, that I had the pleasure of meeting not only the adoptive family, but the birth parents as well who came along to that event. And we love to see that. It gives an opportunity for these families to attend an event where they know everyone else just gets it. They don't have to worry about telling a story or talking about it or explaining anything about their family. They show up at this event and they understand that everyone else there is an adoptive family as well. These kids, sometimes we're talking about families we're talking about white parents who have adopted kids who don't look anything like them, and they show up to an event where that kid gets to meet another kid and go, cool, your family looks like mine. I'm not the only one. And so we have that unique opportunity, along with also, one of my favorite parts of that part of my job is that we partner with Jockey Being Family. So the company Jockey here in the state of Wisconsin donates a backpack with that child's initials every time an adoption is finalized to not only that child, but to any other children living in the home at the time, even if they're foster kids. And so when that finalization happens, that list gets sent my direction, and I get to call them and say, hey, congrats, do you guys want a backpack? For free. And they say, absolutely, most of the time. And then that child gets something that has their new initials on it. It's their own backpack, even if they're a year old or 6 months old or 17 years old. And so it's really an excellent opportunity to connect them with our services and to get to meet them. Sadly, we don't get to drive around the state and drop them off anymore due to COVID. We now have to ship them, so that's sad. But I really do love everything that we do with this. And they work closely in hand with our adoption staff. A lot of us kind of have that 2-hat situation because we know that's really needed.
So in summary, we believe that adoption is a great way to build your family. Chris did a fantastic job this morning, kind of sharing his story. And that's kind of the story of a lot of our families. They're unique in their relationship that they have with the birth parents, but we do have a lot of those. So if you're interested in adoption, we are definitely here to help you. If you know a woman who is pregnant, facing a crisis pregnancy, please send her our way. We will definitely walk that journey with her. If anybody has any questions, we will take them. Otherwise, I am going to invite Father Mullen up here. We have the honor, I had the honor, I think it was last year, to go and speak to his group. And yeah, he has a wonderful adoption committee at his parish. We'll give you that mic.
I won't have the benefit of the microphone. If I sound kind of shaky in my voice, there's two reasons for it. I have essential tremor, which affects my speaking voice, and it affects my hand, which affects this microphone, which affects how it's received. So if you don't understand me, please butt in, okay? All right. I've been promoting adoption since the mid-2000s in my parishes, and then when I got a chance to be the state chaplain for the Knights of Columbus in 2012 to 14, at my talks at the fourth degree exemplification banquet, I always talked about adoption. And then one time, when I was asked to be the honoree, I also talked about adoption. Are we surprised? Okay. Here's my basic thing. We're throwing our kids away. Period. As a society, we got too many children left on the side of the road. Period. You don't have to go very far to find the examples. And if you take that internationally, India loses 40,000 children a year. Loses them. They don't go to orphanages or some other kind of care condition. They're just lost. China loses 540,000 a year. And they think they're doing well because it's down from 2 years ago by 1 or 1.5%. I think social justice demands that we work for a world where every child has the right and the opportunity, the conditions for a good dad and mom. It's that simple. Adoption is really the solution to these issues. Why? Chris brought it up this morning. Chris, I don't want to, you did such a wonderful job, but you hinted at it, and I'm going to develop it a little bit with your permission. He talked about the love of an adopted child and the love of a biological child. That they're the same. Am I right? Okay. How does that come about? With a biological child, you have the natural human impulse to take care of and raise your child as best as you see fit. But when you look at a child that is a stranger, when you look at a child that maybe is older, maybe you look at a group of siblings that come with problems, to love that child as though it's your own takes a unique act of the will. It isn't nature that carries you through the tough times. It is your will, your decision, your commitment to that child. We need to increase that, especially in our Catholic Church. The numbers of children available in the state of Wisconsin, the latest we could get numbers, and please correct me, 1,350. Okay, thank you. I'm so glad you're agreeable. With that, you see, even the organization of the Knights of Columbus themselves, if parents who met the conditions for adoption would move forward with it out of just the Knights of Columbus, we could clear that up in 2 years. Nationwide, the Catholic Church could adopt every child in this nation, I'm convinced, if we had the will to do it. So that's my speaking box. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. As they rightfully said, adoption is expensive, and that's why we have in Rice Lake, KC's, the Adoption Initiative Fund. Now, I want to tell you a little story about that fund. It started with a check for $1,000. Then they held a pancake breakfast. It raised $750. By the end of June, that was in January of 2020. By the end of June, we had $13,000 in the fund, and we did nothing. Nothing. No galas, no auctions, no, just word of mouth. Then we kept at it. I regularly get checks for $500,000 or as low as $2.15. They're all equally important to us. So, when I mention the word adoption to a young couple, the first thing I see in their eyes is dollar signs. I could tell because I've seen it when I've had to ask for the parish. They just go, oh, and you can tell that the cost of the adoption in their imagination is above their means. We have accepted and paid off part of the expenses of one adoption, a relative adoption, a grandmother attempting to adopt her granddaughter, who has been living with her for 10 years. We also have given preliminary consent approval to an application, again, from a couple that want a larger family and cannot have any more than the 2 children they have. We're going to help them too. How are we structured? We take our June 30th balance of our assets, we take 10% of that, and that is available for the next 12 months, July through June. We set that amount aside, and that's what we make available for grants. Now, I'm not here to say support my fund. I don't care. What I want you to do is change your attitude. Speak about adoption in a positive way. Speak about adoption and its capacity to be a great benefit for your family. I look forward to a day when Catholic families who have stable homes and stable incomes will consider adoption along with their biological children. Where adoption in a Catholic home is a regular and, dare I say, expected thing. If that attitude prevailed, there'd be more employees at Catholic social services, but there'd be fewer children without a good mom and dad. I brought along, of course, everybody's got to toot their horn. But here, we have these posters on the table back there. In fact, the 2 gentlemen here are going to pass them out to you. Take as many as you want, okay? We got a printer who needs work. All right? So take as many as you want, which guys, and we also have, I finally learned the name of these things. They're called rack cards to put in a rack. Who knew? Okay. But they are also very informative, good take it home things. And I have a bunch of, this is the first time in my life I've ever had a calling card. Is that what these things are called? Are they still called? Or business card? Like this. You're welcome to take as many of those as you want to. All I ask is use them. Spread them around. Put them on your bedroom mirror. Okay? And most of all, pray. Pray for children who need adoption. And pray for families that want to adopt and have adopted, especially if you know them. We have chosen St. Joseph as our patron. And remember, he adopted Jesus as a stepfather. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Mullen. I feel like nothing I'm going to say is going to follow up that even close, but just thank you for those words. Thank you for the work that you do. Yeah, that was very convicting for me. And thank you, Melissa and Lydia, for your talk and just sharing all the information that you shared. Super helpful for those, maybe considering adoption or know someone, or even just those of us that, haven't learned much about it before. Just a lot of great information that you shared. And I just think about all the women that you've served, all the families, all the lives that you've touched. And I just can only imagine the impact that you've had over the years. So thank you for that. And I've just been thinking throughout the day, especially with all these talks, what can we do if we just leave here today and think about all the nice things that are said, that's great. But wouldn't it be even better if we all could take some action based on today, some way that we could support our communities and pray for and advance this cause of adoption. So at this time, we'll be moving into a holy half hour shortly. But first, a few people to thank. I'm not going to be able to thank everyone, but thank you for anyone and everyone who helped make this day possible. Thank you to Chris and Dee, who had to leave, but thank you for the talk this morning, for your beautiful testimony. Thank you again to Melissa and Lydia for being here and sharing. Thank you to Father Mullen and all the priests that are here today. Thank you to the Knights of Columbus for being here. And just to all of you who are coming, who are here via live stream. And again, I would encourage you to, if you know someone that should have heard the talk today that didn't, share the recorded version. That is on the Facebook or YouTube? Parish's Facebook, and then the Office of Evangelization and Missionary Discipleship, the YouTube channel for that. Okay. So during this time, we'll have adoration, and the Knights of Columbus, I believe, are leading a rosary at this time. And there'll also be confession available. So Father John Garrett's is going to be